Yes, love's a secret weapon. Yeah!
Hi, I'm Donna Loren.
And I'm Dr. Adam Gerace.
And you are listening to Love's a Secret Weapon podcast.
It's such a shame. The hours come and go and I call his name because I need him so, but it's no good. I wish he could love me the way I love him, but if the feeling's just not there, there's nothing in the world that will make him care. It's such a shame. It's something I must face, but he's not to blame for all the tears I taste. How could he know? Unless he can love me the way I love him. But if the feeling's just not there, there's nothing in the world gonna make him care. I know I've been a fool for him, and I've tried to play it cool for him, but when he's near I seem to fall apart. And I know he doesn't care for me, and I know he doesn't share with me all the things I'm feeling in my heart, Oh, I love him. Oh, but it's no good. I wish he could love me the way I love him. But if the feeling's just not there, there's nothing in the world gonna make him care. Nothing in the world that will make him care. Oh, how I wish that he
Chapter 22. It's such a shame. My dad? Because my belief is that we're all connected, and sometimes a generation or a lifetime comes where people are reunited. Who's to say that somewhere down the line my adopted father and I weren't related? I give it that latitude of acceptance of why people are in your life, especially someone who says, "Call me your father," but really isn't. Maury was a good provider. This was not only through working as an animator, but he was able to provide a home for his family through a GI loan. I truly think that he was in love with my mother and that he really wanted to have a family with her and take care of her to the best of his ability. But I think that his influences as a child were stronger than his ability to mature to the man he really wanted to be. I really believe his childhood separation from his parents and having to live in an orphanage took its toll on his sequential development. What made matters even worse was his choice to bond over lies with my mother because he had a conscience. I think cumulatively over the years, his conscience caught up with him, and although he lived a relatively long life, it certainly destroyed his stomach. While he may have been prone to that genetically anyway, that certainly doesn't mean that the choices he made didn't have an impact. In the same way that I suffered from an inability to make decisions because decisions were made for me, I feel that he was a victim of the same type of situation. With his mother's illness, decisions were made for him. Choosing not to be honest about my life was not the best choice for him.
Good times begin with Dr. Pepper. Different, Dr. Pepper. Not a cola, not a root beer. A light and lively taste that you'll cheer. Relax, refresh, enjoy it now. It's Dr. Pepper time. The Dr. Pepper difference.
What resulted was so much lack of communication, especially when my career started and we were basically living together, sharing the same room. I always thought that he was a quiet man, but I think he probably felt guilty or felt that he certainly couldn't be honest with me. Where do you start? Basically, he just laid out some rules. Maury couldn't share himself with me with all the time we spent together, especially in the 5 years we traveled endlessly. I now believe that it was not because he was a quiet man, but his priority was his relationship with my mother, and he took that to his grave. When Maury became my manager, he told me that he would protect me from the men who would violate and endanger me. The way that he demonstrated his protection only instilled more fear, and on the other hand, sheltered me from fraternizing with anybody. His tactic created an alienation that prevented me from experiencing life with all the people I worked with. Instead, there was an extreme codependency. In fact, as I grew into my career, I would stand inches away from both my parents, seeing their lips quiver when they tried to hold a smile. I always sensed their fears and compensated for them by directing my energy toward courage and dignity. I was not only a provider for them financially, but emotionally as well. My life was always in chaos internally. I could never have an independent thought, and I likened it to how an elephant is shackled to take away its freedom. And when the shackle is removed, the elephant never forgets. That sums up my relationship with my parents. I tried to think of myself as an independent person with my own opinions, but I always had an inner struggle. I struggled because of the sacrifice I would have to make in regards to any authority figure, especially my parents. The mindset that I was taught was, you can never be anything without us. And I believed it, just like the elephant. I wrestled with this time and time again until only recently I was awakened to an inherited pattern of codependency beginning with my maternal grandmother. It is the pattern of children raising children. That was something I really liked about Hillary Clinton's book, It Takes a Village, because sometimes maybe most times, parents don't have all the skills to raise their own children. In other words, an adult gives the appearance of someone who has the experience and the knowledge and hopefully the wisdom to take care of themselves so that when a child is in their life, they can take care of him or her. What I have discovered is that beneath the thin veneer, an adult facade is sheltering a childlike mind with latent developmental issues. The whole "it takes a village" concept is the shared responsibility approach. I have no regrets when it comes to setting an intention for my children to know who they were and discover their gifts as early on as possible. But with all the emotional entanglements that I didn't understand, I would have loved to have someone to turn to that could have given me advice and guided me through all the neurosis I imparted on my children. Sometimes we all live in a fishbowl. A prominent leader enters the world stage and echoes your life. The details may be different, but the feelings are the same. I always had the greatest respect for Bill Clinton and was downright excited to see him run for president. Not since the days of John Kennedy running for president was I this excited and involved. One day I remember being on Beverly Drive at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, running down a street, holding Katie's hand, trying to find a TV because there was a debate being held. I found a TV in a restaurant and I sat there glued for the whole time. There was excitement in the air because maybe this was somebody who cared about everyday people. When he confessed to his infidelity, it was probably the most shattering moment in his wife Hillary's, life. He'd lied to her and he'd used her. It totally humiliated her, and she couldn't trust him anymore. When Clinton apologized to the American people, he stated, "I gave in to my shame." In a speech on September 11th, 1998, President Clinton began with, "I have been on a quiet journey these last few weeks to get to the end of this, to the rock bottom truth of where I am and where we all are. The children of this country can learn in a profound way that integrity is important and selfishness is wrong, but God can change us and make us strong at the broken places. I want to embody those lessons for the children of this country. Now is the time for turning. But for us, turning does not come so easily. It takes an act of will for us to make a turn. It means breaking old habits. It means admitting that we've been wrong. And this is never easy. It means losing face. It means starting all over again. And this is always painful. It means saying, "I'm sorry." It means recognizing that we have the ability to change. These things are terribly hard to do, but unless we turn, we will be trapped forever in yesterday's ways. President Clinton was acquitted by the Senate of impeachment. It could have been very different if Maury stepped up to Ruth and said, "I just can't live with this lie," instead of sitting me down when I was 7 and telling me that if I didn't sing, I would be nothing. How about sitting down and saying, "We love you very much and we will always love you. Your dad is the man who is raising you, but he isn't your biological father. He loves you and cares about you. And we know that you love to sing." In hindsight, that would have been so much more constructive for all of us. It doesn't make sense to me how anybody can function without the truth. Now that I've been living with the truth for almost 20 years, one has to try to remember a story that is laden with manipulation. What a terribly exhausting waste of time. A month before Maury died, I actually heard his spirit tell me, "Be all you could be." He said it in a very loving way. I was sitting in my living room in Kohala at my piano. It was a profound moment. About a month later, I was notified that he had passed on. Apparently, he called for me when he was near his death. My emotions were very stifled at the time, and I was very much in resentment about not being told the truth. On his birthday, after I moved to Los Angeles, I visited his grave with my mother beside him. After our initial reunion in Hawaii, when I asked her to tell me the story of my biological father, I sent for my mother a second time to attend my wedding. My brother Ricky and his wife came as well. By now, Jared's mother had become a widow and was living in the little guest cottage I had initially offered my mother. My mother and I went for a drive and passed by a little strip mall at Kauai Harbor. She needed a chocolate fix and asked to stop at an ice cream stand. My mother trembled at the thought of eating her precious chocolate. I remember her shaking like a junkie when she would go to her kitchen cupboard to break off a piece of her supersized Hershey bar. Oh, what a drug that chocolate is. In Hawaii, there is a folklore about centipedes, representing jealousy. Ironically, my mother was passing through a doorway in my house when a centipede dropped from above, missing her by an inch or two. I view this as an affirmation. During the wedding, Jared's mother, who was 88, and her two older sisters from Canada stayed at the Waikoloa Hilton, so my mother could have a place to stay at our house. One evening after the wedding, my mother surprised Jared and myself with a visit. We were sitting at our kitchen table when my mother walked in through the back door. She stood at the opposite end of the table to where we were sitting, reminiscent of the time she stood at the foot of my bed when I was only 3. She wanted to share her sentiments with us, that she believed I chose the right one for me. Then her personality flipped. It was completely unprovoked, but there she stood, venomous. The only positive thing to come out of that experience was that Jared could witness her duality. When you push something so meaningful in your life down into your deepest emotion, it's a slow suicide. My mother's health deteriorated to the point where she lived her final years in a wheelchair, homebound, dependent on others. Her hands remained agile, able to handwrite birthday cards to me most every year. She loved to crochet. Hell, she could do it blindfolded. I still have a blanket she made for me. But she didn't live long enough to make one for my first grandchild. We did, however, have a little conversation about what color to make it before she died. I'm learning to have great compassion for my mother and her choices in life. The time of grieving is over, and I emphasize the good memories.
Wow, that's a really impactful chapter, Donna, and thank you for sharing that with me and sharing that with our listeners, because I think besides the emotion that went into both writing that and reading it, I think it really does speak, and it's so important at this time because it really speaks to so much of what we have spoken about throughout this book. First of all, really this idea that we are all products of our environments, and we often take with us the lessons or the experiences that we have had, particularly in our younger years, and how I think many of us spend a lifetime sometimes trying to understand those and to, um, I guess, not that we can correct them, but we can learn from them so that we are not stuck in that earlier part of our lives, that childhood, which is often, as I think you state, driven by a lot of fear. That when people get stuck in those younger years of or not so much younger years, but those aspects of development that are less evolved or less refined, they're often based on fear. And so for you to spend the time trying to understand your parents when perhaps they couldn't understand themselves, I think, to some extent in their lifetimes, or to at least they weren't able to maybe surmount some of those things that they had experienced. And for you to talk to our readers about the importance of doing that ourselves, if we can, is really impactful and important.
Well said, my darling Dr. Adam. You know, I think that, personal growth is amazing.
Mm.
And the experience of telling my story up to this point in my life was really kind of an evolution of personal growth. And there's our darling little Lucy.
There she is.
Our
You're affirming, aren't you, Luce?
She's the wise one. She is definitely the wise one. And that's what we're all trying to achieve, at least. Okay, we're trying to achieve wisdom. And I know that's certainly a goal of mine. And achieving wisdom is really being totally honest with yourself, which can be so painful. Not in every case. I mean, so many people that we have spoken to, from our fan guests and our friends that have visited with us on the podcast, have had wonderful childhoods, and they've had sequential development and very happy lives and very productive lives and very creative lives. I think that my own personal experience was one of overcoming obstacles. And yes, I personally do not want to be stuck. When you're experiencing life, I think, and you can probably add to this, that, when you're in it, when you're in it, it's hard to see the forest for the trees.
Yes.
Emotion is very debilitating, and if you have a lot of sorrow and that sadness, that comes from not having that nurturing ability to grow as an infant into, your adolescence and then into your adult life, and kind of have a sense of knowing who you are and what your purpose is. And then you blaze your trails and you fall down and you pick yourself up. And that nurturing, I think, is what we all want. And I did get it from, I got it until I was 7 years old from my mother's father. He literally was the only person I can think of that impacted my life so deeply that, as I'm speaking with you now, I can feel his arms around me. I can feel his warm embrace. I can see his eyes of unconditional love. Yeah. And that's what we all want. And those of us, unfortunately, and I know I was referring to a past president, but there are other leaders that are currently in the same complex situation where, I really kind of have to sum it up that a great deal of us that are walking around in adult bodies on this planet are immature. We're just we suffer from immaturity. We are acting as children. We want to be taken care of, and therefore authorities take advantage of that.
That's interesting.
Various aspects of life that we've abdicated our power.
That's very interesting. That idea of that we can sometimes see, or it's hard to see, because perhaps what we want, as you said, is to be taken care of, to have decisions made for us. And unfortunately, the people who step up to say, I'm going to do that for you and I'll take care of everything, and not always the people that should be doing it for us. But we can't always see that, or because of our own needs, our own fears. Again, I think fears comes up again and again. That never can lead to good ultimately for us.
No, it just can't, because, truly, there are really only two elements that, you can function from: fear or love.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you
That's
know what my favorite four-letter word is? LOVE.
Hey, Luce, is that true? That is true, isn't it? Absolutely. And we've spoken about that, almost that opposite of fear is that whether it's love, whether it's compassion, whether it's bonding with others, but that just short circuits so much. That fear, that shame that we have spoken about throughout this book, that when people experience shame, it doesn't make them want to look to inward. It doesn't make them want to bond with people or to be vulnerable with people. It drives a wedge between people, and that's why it is so toxic in all its forms, and we
And
see that again and again in the world.
and powerful. Oh, can I share a story with you in terms of shame? Shame as an energy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is another.
Let's talk it over.
Okay, thank you. So going back to my beginning days in living with Jared in Hawaii, so in the mid-90s, I met a naturopath who I started working with. And at one point, he offered to give me a book to read. And the book was called Power versus Force. And actually, he made a house call because on the Big Island, you know, we were still functioning that kind of old-fashioned way, that you didn't always have to go to an office. That, you know.
Yeah. So, wow, I tell you, that's only in the 90s, but that seems like a world ago, doesn't it?
So it was a blessing. But so he shows up with this book and he leaves it, you know, with me, and I put it by my bedside. And the next morning I pick it up, and my husband, you know, is sitting next to me, and he said, "Where did you get that?" In a tone that was like, you know, questioning in a weird way.
Yeah.
And so I said, "Well, you know, Dr. Wayne, you know, lent it to me to read." And he said, "Give it to me." So I did. And he held it. And he turns to me and he says, "The man who wrote this book was my neighbor."
Oh, wow.
In Sedona.
Oh.
David R. Hawkins.
Wow.
And he said, "For 20 years, I knew he was my neighbor, but I never saw him until he gave a party at this book, you know, kind of launch, and and came out, you know. But for 20 years, he was traveling the world measuring energy, and he was using kinesiology. So leave it to me. So I'm reading this book, and it comes to a point where there's a list of energies that he measured. Now, this book, I think, was completed in 1994. And he said in this book, and you can still find it, you know, it's still being published. The bottom energy, the most negative energy, is shame.
Right.
The most controlling energy is shame.
Right.
And you know, I don't have the book in front of me, so I can't go up the list. But, you know, then there's blame, then there's deprivation, then there's, you know, jealousy. There's all these, you know, and he names them according to measuring them for 20 years kinetically.
I think even if that's pretty cool to be able to sort of register it at that level, and even if our listeners perhaps don't, you know, relate to that idea that these things can be measured in a frequency or an energy, I think that makes a lot of sense when we think of the most toxic. You know, what are those most toxic emotions? Shame has to be right up there with the most negative of them.
Sure. I mean, when you think about the ancient healers, let's say in the last 5,000 years since the patriarchal epochs, you know, began, approximately 5,000 years ago, according to what I understand, that the way to dominate is to make someone feel less than.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, going all the way to slavery. I mean,
Yeah.
these are big subjects way beyond my ability to, I only have my kitchen table opinions, but to acquiesce your power, and to fall so low into shame, that literally I can detect it, and I used to detect it in myself from the posture that someone has.
Yeah.
If you hang your head down, if your heart is heavy, your shoulders are rounded, your body is not holding your organs in the proper anatomy, and you develop disease, you develop illness, you develop all kinds of depression, etc. Shame is the most controlling energy. So that's I just wanted to, but I have to say, by just closing out this little story of the book, that once Jared told me this man was his neighbor, he did give me the book back. And as I got through it, I also returned it to Dr. Wayne. So
and he could give it to someone else, and and keep that library going. But I think it's, I mean, there's good scientific evidence that things like shame are related to depression and anxiety and all sorts of other issues as well. So it's not the shame in itself, but it's also the issues that it causes. That shame, I think, has a negative, or is at least not. No, it's probably a negative relation. Whereas guilt, when we know we've done something wrong, guilt is can be relationship repairing, because it's not about I'm a terrible person. It could be, yes, I did a terrible thing, but that's not my identity. And when that happens, I think there's actually evidence that guilt-prone people, when they're in a situation with someone who they feel they've wronged, can take that person's perspective better and empathize with that person than if someone is shamed, because shame, I think, closes off a whole range of things. So it's an incredibly interesting discussion, I think, to be had based on what you've read. And the other thing that comes across to me is, when you were reading this chapter, is this idea also that when we can start to understand the people that came before us, particularly in our family, and to develop more compassion for them, to realize or to understand in some way, or to at least appreciate in some way what they went through, that's also healing for us. It's not just for them if they are still around, or in many cases they're not. It humanizes them. I think it makes us realize the fallibility of everyone, but it can also be healing to us as well. I don't think it's just for them. It helps us to understand how we're a product of what we've come from, and sometimes it can take generations to heal that and to understand it. And maybe that's our luck, if we are a person who does want to commit to heal, that's something that we're fortunate that we've made that decision, because many people don't. Unfortunately, they don't know where to begin.
Well, I do. I do, and I think you'll second the emotion. I think we start with loving ourselves. And we have, I think we've talked about this before, we have been sold this idea that taking time to love yourself could be seen as a selfish act. And that is part of a power grab for, at any rate, I won't finish my sentence, but when you begin to surrender to loving yourself, forgiving yourself, for seeing who you are, for discovering your purpose, for discovering the things you love, the people you love, the life you love, whatever you love, that's what builds the compassion for others, that you can glance out of the corner of your eye to someone as they're passing by. And with that little speck of love you show them, just because you've acknowledged them, can penetrate something that maybe they've never felt before. You know, a tiny, tiny glance. But you have to fill yourself up first.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And it's interesting, sometimes when you do give people that look, some can be receptive to it, some can be quite surprised by it, but receptive to it, and some can be fearful of it, I think, because perhaps they haven't felt that before. So they're like, why is this person in the street with this little dog looking at me in this way? Just using not a personal experience, of course, but you're so right about whether we call it love or self-care. And I was reading something interesting. I think it was in, I'm going to say Cosmopolitan. I might be wrong.
Really?
But Sarah, yeah, you sound surprised. I'm like Bob. Bob tends to, he reads a big tome of a book, and I'm, reading a magazine. But that's fine.
That's lovely.
Whatever works. But I think whatever magazine it was Sarah Jessica Parker talking, and they asked her about what her sort of self-care routines are. And she said that she likes to find some time to read, but she was being very tentative about talking about self-care because she realized the privilege that she has, that so many people struggle, and so many people, it's easy for her to say, well, my self-care is I'll go off to the spa or whatever. And people are like, well, wait a sec, I can't make ends meet. And I was reading reader comments about it, and people were of different perspectives. Some said, yes, that was a good idea that she showed that restraint. But others were saying that perhaps we need to see self-care differently, that often people do say they don't have time for self-care or money for self-care. And that's certainly true. Like, many people don't have the ability to take themselves to the spa. But what perhaps was missing in that conversation was this idea that what can be a barrier for people engaging in self-care, and self-care doesn't have to be something expensive. It can be something where you've just got time to read a book, or to engage in some breathing exercises, or some yoga, trying to see a friend, or something like that. It doesn't necessarily have to have money. And albeit I understand that when people are so strapped and got so many responsibilities, it's difficult. But I think one of the barriers sometimes to self-care is this idea that we feel we are being selfish for doing it, and that because we have so much obligation to other people, we just couldn't possibly do it. And I think that's where we need to flip the idea of that it is not selfish. And when we think we haven't got time for it because we've got so many other people and the obligation to them, that's something we also have to rethink as well. Are we giving too much and we have nothing left?
Well, I've come to realize that in situations where you're giving, there's a wisdom to know how much to give. Let's just make a little, scenario here. And you walk into your office because, you're going to work, and you're not crazy about what you're doing because you're doing it to make money. And you pass by all your work, your colleagues and whatever, and everybody's busy, and maybe nobody's happy, but something sparks you because maybe you said a prayer in the morning before you left for the office. Maybe you said a prayer before you went anywhere to work or anywhere. Maybe you woke up and just said, thank you. Thank you for another day. Thank you for my life. Thank you for this experience. I don't know why I'm this person. I don't know why I'm, doing time with this particular thing that I'm doing, but I am so grateful for being alive. And I think it's contagious. And I think that so many people feel that, as I used to, that, there is an obligation, and that there is someone above you and controlling you. Well, there is no separation when you wake up in the morning, or whenever you wake up, and you say, thank you for another day. Thank you for my life. dear God, creator, source, whatever you want to call the, the infinite. And remind yourself during the course of the day, everything that you do, if you drink that cup of coffee and it tastes good going down and it's still hot, or maybe it's not. And you're like, well, I'd prefer that it was hot. And tomorrow I'm determined that it will be hot. But this is the difference of creating a world. And we're not even creating a world. The word of our podcast for this episode is co-creation. We are not the creator. We are just an infinitesimal speck of life in the big picture of not just this planet, the universe, the galaxies, etc., etc. And why not call on the source? Why not take your tiny little heart and connect it with the largest heart that you can ever imagine, and connect with that and stay with that energy wherever you are, walking down a busy street, walking through a hayfield, whatever you're doing, you stay connected vertically. Keep your feet on the ground. I'm 76 years old. I know I'm not the oldest person, but I've lived a long time. And I've gone through a lot of stuff. And this is working for me. This is working for me for whatever happens. And I share this with you, Dr. Adam. I share this with all our friends that are listening.
Yeah.
And I pray that we practice this and co-create a world that we want to live in by being who we really are, being loving beings. Just like you and I wrote this book together. We collaborated.
Absolutely.
I couldn't have done it without you.
Thank you. Just thinking about what we're talking about, that idea of that connection and how that can change lives with people, and how we've brought up the conversation to the present day, that while the story that you were talking about was of a lifetime history, we're engaged in the now. We're engaged in how can we be as present as possible, which so many of us struggle with. I struggle with it incredibly. There's an activity that I sometimes give students, and I try to do it myself. And I must say that here we go. And I must say that I think animals, because we can hear Lucy kind of in the background, are the best of it, because when they go out, they are engaged in their surroundings. They're smelling the flowers or whatever else. They're looking at the sights. They're running on the grass, and how does that feel? And the activity is really about that, is finding some time and calling it kind of a savoring expedition, where you say, okay, no matter how busy I am, even if I only got 30 minutes or 40 minutes at some point, and you choose somewhere you're going to go to savor it, whether it's outside in a field, whether it's at a museum, whether it's at a concert, whether it's listening to music, whether it's at the beach, wherever. And what you do for that time is you go prepared. So, if you're at the beach, make sure you've got what you need. But when you're there, you're fully engaged. You look at what's there, you smell what's there, you hear what's there. If your mind wanders back to what you have to do during the day, you say that's okay, and you return back to the savoring. Any concerns, you say, I'm going to put them aside. I can worry about my concerns tonight when I get home if I want to. But when you're there, you're fully immersed in that moment. And there's a lot of evidence that it contributes to our well-being. It contributes to our positive emotions, our optimism even, which is really fascinating. It actually puts us in a more positive mindset. It can connect us to other people, either if we're experiencing it with them or we go home and tell them about it. There's a range of really positive effects of what, again, we might think we just don't have time for that. But is there a time of something you're doing normally during the day that you might just be able to savor? I know we often speak about mindfulness, that you can be mindful when you're washing the dishes and just focus on the here and now. Savoring ups at a level by not only engaging in what's there, but really heightening the experience by focusing on your senses.
So what you're saying is by finding ways by doing what you love to do. I mean, even if you're collecting garbage and you see a dead flower, you can still say, "Oh my God, I remember when you were beautiful, and I'm so sorry." Now you're being recycled, and whatever awareness will keep you in the present.
That's so true. That
will recover. You will recover from shame little by little.
Yep. You can even do mindful photography, which is, not only enjoying the experience, but photographing it and then using those photographs later to reminisce on it. So maybe you have a picture of that flower when it was, at a more, pleasant state of development. But,
yes, in full bloom.
Yes, absolutely. So just something that our listeners might want to try. I try to do it. I'm not good at maintaining it, but I try to do it, and Lucy certainly does it.
And Lucy reminds you to do it.
Yes, absolutely.
That's what we also need to do, is keep reminding each other. That's why Love's a Secret Weapon podcast is going to continue, and as our friends and our community, but this is beyond a podcast community, because whatever breath you take, and you take that breath with love, you take that breath with love, and it molecularly goes out into the atmosphere. Whether you see it or not, it does. It's energy. It might be invisible, but it's energy. It is traveling. And that's when that will connect with, who knows, someone on the other side of the world.
I hadn't thought about that.
Every breath you take. And absolutely, breath is sacred. It is the most sacred way of staying in the present. Okay, I'm going to share, and maybe we can close with this. In addition to what you were saying about being in the present, in a state of awareness of your environment, wherever you are, okay, now, this is my breathing technique that I've learned from masters. You slowly breathe in at the count of 4 through your nose. You hold it for a count of 7. Hold that oxygen inside all of you, trying to visualize how it's circulating in your shoulders, in your spine, throughout your body. And then at the count of 7, you release it very slowly to the count of 8. And you repeat that 3 times. I do that every night before I go to sleep. It's the last thing I do is sacred breath. And because, I have asthma, I do have in my limitations. Others of you may want to do it many more times.
Yeah.
Before you go to sleep, consciously, you will be in the present, and you will not believe your dreams, wherever your dreams take you. And when you wake up, you'll remember certain aspects of your dreams. It'll take you to your childhood. It'll take you to a past life. It'll take you all over wherever you're supposed to go. When you try and do that, I tell you, it's miraculous.
Sounds very much like a grounding technique of being in the present. And there's so much good that comes out of that. So I think that is a perfect way to wrap up our part of the conversation now, and ask our listeners to stay tuned for our fan guest. Till next time, thanks again, Donna, for the conversation.
Many blessings to you and little Lucy, and to all of our friends all over the world. Love's a secret weapon.
Secret Weapon community. We, as you're aware, do this quite regularly on the podcast, and we're really happy to do so, to be able to connect with people from all parts of the world and all walks of life. And today we have as our fan guest Kelly Munroe. So welcome, Kelly. How are you today?
Welcome, Kelly.
Hi, Donna Loren.
Hi, honey. Hi, Kelly.
Now that's
Hi,
Donna
Dr.
Loren.
Adam.
Hi, Kelly.
Welcome to a Sunday conversation.
Yes, I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, that's wonderful, honey. Well, we're happy that you are here, and we're delighted to invite you into our little world of Love's a Secret Weapon. So happy to have you as our fan guest, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well,
Where do you begin?
might as well start from the beginning. Yes.
Okay, always the best place.
When I fell in love with you, I was
Ooh.
9, and so it's coming to my attention that I've been manifesting you into my life and manifesting this moment for 50 years.
Oh my
I'll
goodness,
be 59 in September, and
all right. So now we're officially soul sisters.
my 9-year-old self would never have believed it.
Well,
But here we are.
I hear you're a powerful woman.
I don't know about that, but sure. I will go with that.
We will find your power and draw it out. You just begin to tell us, and Adam and I are all ears.
Absolutely.
Oh, well, I believe I was 9 when I first saw you on television in the summertime in South Florida. They've got, at that time back in the 70s, they only had 3 stations and not including PBS. And on one of the stations, every summer they would show the beach movies. And I would watch them, and I wasn't really aware of who Annette was or Frankie was. I just thought everybody was cute. They all had their little swimsuits on, and it was just so different from my environment. I grew up in South Florida in an area called Coconut Grove, which is predominantly African American. And I went to we only had one elementary school. The one that I went to was in a neighborhood called Coral Gables, which is predominantly Cuban Americans. And so that was the culture that I was used to seeing. And so when I saw, would watch the bingo movies, the beach movies, it just was so fascinating to me and exotic, singing and surfing. That was so strange.
Okay, ready?
It only hurts when I cry. It only hurts when I cry.
Go, Donna!
You asked me if I ever longed for him since we said goodbye. Sure, I get sad, but it's not too bad. It only hurts when I cry. You see, I hardly even think of him as time goes slowly by. I just go on, there's nothing wrong. It only hurts when I cry. hurts when I cry. It only hurts when I
And just one day I saw you singing It Only Hurts When I Cry. And I don't know, that song just made such a deep impression upon me. I'm not really sure why, because, you know, you sang a lot of songs and everybody else was singing, but that one song really stuck out. And over these last 50 years, the song would float in and out of my head, you know? And I reached out to you once. I'm sure you might not remember this, but in 2015 is actually when I reached out to you. Yes, on Facebook, and I, you know, telling everybody this is Donna Loren is the grooviest of all the groovy chicks. And you saw my post and you liked it, and then I freaked out and I showed everybody, and it was just so cool. And I experienced some things from 2015 to right about now. It was just some life lessons. I had a really good job actually, making what I consider to be a lot of money, and was diagnosed with lupus. And I knew that I had an autoimmune situation because I was first got a hint of it when I was back in South Florida, and I couldn't hold on a job, calling out sick all the time. And one thing led to another. I wound up in New Mexico, and people say, "How'd you wind up in New Mexico?" And I would have to tell them, "Just drop me in New Mexico," because that is, it's almost literally that way. I was just dropped in New Mexico.
And that's where you are now?
Yes, that's where I am now. I'm in Albuquerque. I spent some time actually from about 2016 to 2019 in a variety of shelters. And I would have to say that's when things started turning positive.
Really?
I was out of the shelter, and, but things are still a little off.
Sure.
I joined the Anglican Church, and I was in a church for a year and a few months, and met some nice people. As a matter of fact, my best friend and I from the church, we just went out the other day to lunch, took me out to lunch. And but fast forward to just this past January, I don't know, I just got an epiphany that organized religion was not really what I was seeking after. And I had stopped going to church, I think, in the fall, around November, but officially resigned in January. But just started learning about metaphysics and manifesting.
Oh my goodness.
And all the while, you were you were a part of me. Donna, you know what? I have realized that because you were in the show The Mothers-in-Law, right? Well, I used to watch that when I was a toddler back in Arizona.
Right.
And I realized that you've been in my orbit, yours, but you've been in my orbit, my celestial orbit, for a really long time.
Well, we have an extended family. That's what we have. And you know what? Right now, Kelly, what your story is telling me, that the whole world, all of us, and I'm going to put this in quotes, loving beings, are finding our hearts and coming together to make this world a place we want and we envision, and that feeds our souls and feeds our hearts. Indeed, Dr. Adam and Kelly and all whom are listening, and wow, you have, timing is everything. So, one other thing, honey, when you had that
very, very challenging time. I've had my share as well, and Dr. Adam, you can definitely reiterate and
Certainly.
affirm that I really believe this with all my heart, is that, the antithesis of greed is humility. And we have been suffering as a global society for thousands of years now from greed and arrogance and patriarchal dominance. And here we are coming to the precipice of the Aquarian age of unity and coming together. And so we have been experiencing a lot of humility. And to drop to your knees and have to be in a shelter with an illness and go through that kind of change, it just takes you to a place where you're contributing to the healing of the planet. Did you know
I truly
that?
believe that. Yes, I
Yes.
truly believe that. I've been listening to just very recently a lot of near-death experiences, testimonials, and they all say the exact same thing that you just said. And I really do believe that. Yes.
Yes. It's actually as difficult a time as it is in regard to everything. I mean, Dr. Adam and I were just discussing, the incredible heat that the planet is experiencing. And of course, I'm going to throw in, the irresponsibility of the corporations and the industries that have created it. But it's time for us. It's kind of like in the Bible when it says the meek shall speak, and so, but now it's time for the meek to really not just speak, and not to shout, but to make our presence known.
Yes, I believe that.
And and there's an energy that I see happening all over the world where it's kind of like the spiritual warrior is coming out. The demonstrators are going out, risking their lives, and protesting, what they feel is only their right. And, they're not going to take it anymore. And, we can all say something about that, but that's what I've been witnessing in each one of us. It also goes back to the idea of, people saying, well, what can I do? And then you feel helpless, but we're not, because if each one of us takes a good, hard, deep look and says, okay, wait a minute, this is what I love about myself, this is what I don't love about myself, what can I do to improve and become more aware and grow and be part of the whole and be part of the healing. So, we're all kind of on this path, not all of us, but those of us that are, each one by one, and you are definitely one. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are kind words. And yes, I have to agree. Recently, everything is recent. A lot of things have just happened within the last, since January. I gained a new daughter-in-law.
Oh.
And I have a new grandbaby. He just turned 3 months on the 7th.
Congratulations.
And he's sweet. And my daughter-in-law is the type of daughter I've always prayed for. I have 3 sons. I never had any girls. But she is just exactly the type of person that I would have wanted to be a part of my little family. She's very like-minded in the way that she thinks. And so I can have these type of conversations with her.
Beautiful.
And I'm just, glad a part of my life.
Beautiful. Well, look what you've attracted. You've manifested a lot.
In a short amount of time, too.
Yes. Well, Dr. Adam, I'm sure you have.
Yes, I've been just thinking and listening, and absolutely, Kelly, I think it's so interesting what you say, that you've manifested, of course, but you've done the hard work as well. You sound like someone who is committed to trying to understand yourself better, to understand the world better, and really demonstrated a lot of resilience in all that you've handled. But,
yes.
to be very motivated to understand yourself and to live the life that you want to live. And it
Yeah.
sounds like it's been really challenging, but that you're doing it.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm amazed. I am amazed at myself when I see how the
Yeah.
first 50 something years were.
Mm,
I would hope that I can have another 50, but the first 50
Mhm.
years were just, they were trying.
yeah.
But I
Mhm.
just kept sticking with it,
Mhm.
and here I am.
Yeah, boy, I think that's the key, is to never give up. But when you drop into the unknown, I think that's where so many people are now, and some people are in
Mm.
denial, and they're not willing to say, okay, I don't know what's going on. I don't know how I fit in or what I can do about it, but this unknown is, to me, and I've shared this with Dr. Adam before, is this kind of time space continuum that puts us in a place of sheer trust and
Oh, yeah.
faith. And it's the greatest lesson. I mean, it's like if you finally find yourself down the rabbit hole and you're like, when I'm going to land or if I'm going to land, and then finally, and it's like that trust comes in. And I find that I just have this little old heart. And when I connect my little old heart with the universe and with the galaxies, there's a huge source out there.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah, so I'm like, guide me.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
And you sound, Kelly, very, as you said, you tried sort of more organized religion, and that perhaps wasn't the direction you wanted to go in. But, there can be a difference between religion and spirituality, and you sound
Oh,
very
yes.
spiritual.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, at one point, I was even, and I'm putting this in quotes, a pastor's wife. I'm putting pastor in quotes. I
Okay.
was a pastor's wife for
Mm.
a long time,
Yeah.
and he was not pastoral.
Okay.
And I I don't know. It was
Well,
crazy.
may I again, I don't mind if I, just interpret what you're saying as a history of
Hmm.
so long that this patriarchal dominance has, been in our lives. And you almost get to the point where you can identify it. You just have to back away. But when you're in it, it's like, well, there's no awareness there. I mean, that's where the stuckness is, and it's really no fault of anyone's. It's because it's been perpetrated for so long. It's like
Yeah.
part of the traditional DNA of behavior that no longer is accepted. Period.
Yes.
That's
You're
very
absolutely right.
that's very true, and this whole idea of I think what you say, Donna, is really important. That sometimes when we're in these situations, we can't see it, we don't know it, or we do know it. There's something niggling there, but we don't quite know what's wrong, but we know this isn't right, and that can take time. And sometimes when we get out of these things, we think to ourselves, why was I in that? Why did I do that? But it is, we can choose to see that as, well, why did I do that? Or we can choose to see that as painful as that was, we've learned from it.
Well, don't you think,
Yeah.
Dr. Adam, that we come in with a reservoir of love in our heart, and if we're in relationships that are reciprocal, and it's a mutual giving, then the reservoir stays full.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
if you come into a situation where it's constantly depleted at one point, you're empty, you're out of it.
And also, I think there's something that they often say in the well-being sort of area, is that you can't fill someone else's cup if yours is empty, and that idea that it's also hard to I guess give to others and be of service to others if we ourselves are not looked after because of whatever situations we're in.
Yeah, but you know what, darling, Kelly, you started this conversation, about your own empowerment, and I think you've taken it. You've embodied, this connection with the source, and and you're on your path, you know, and
Yeah.
you know, and your wellness, your immune system is going to respond to that as well.
I think I'm the healthiest person I've met that's got lupus.
Okay, so what is your goal?
What's my goal? I need to absolutely lose some more pounds because I'm only 5'3" and I weigh a little bit too much to be at this height.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know,
Well,
just
it's all in how you feel.
yes, I try not to dwell in my illness because for a really
Mm-hmm.
long time, that's what defined me.
Yeah.
And it was just my conversation was just all about me being sick. And I just got tired. I got sick of hearing me talking about being sick.
How ironic. So
And
listen,
so I just stopped.
you know, since I was 21, I discovered a book, and it's called Food is Your Best Medicine.
Oh.
And it's written by a doctor named Henry Beeler. I think it's Bieler. And he was like at the beginning of the 20th century. So he was way ahead of his time in these thoughts, although he ascribed to the theories of Hippocrates that goes back to Greece, 3,000 plus years ago. Food is your best medicine. And one of the things that I've adopted that Adam is probably tired of hearing me about, but that was bad English. Wait a minute. Tired of hearing about.
There we go.
is a recipe that I can tell you about, and you can use it to supplement a meal. And basically, it's a vegetable soup that helps to alkalize your body. And because the acid that we consume is what creates inflammation.
Yeah.
And so sugar and wheat that's grown in America, unfortunately, because it's so poisoned by insecticides and GMOs, and it's about educating yourself, about what you're consuming, and keeping it as fresh as possible so your body can assimilate it. But if you want, I can tell you the food group that I make my soup, and I've been doing this since I was 21 years old. So it's
Oh
helped
yeah, I
me
would
a
like to
lot.
hear about that. Yes.
Okay, so here we go. So it's equal parts. You steam up, or put a little bit of water in a pot and cook just for about 8 or 10 minutes. Equal parts zucchini, celery, string beans. Okay, you cook up those three, and then you have fresh parsley, and you have all equal amounts. And then once the three vegetables are cooked up about 8 or 10 minutes, you don't want to overcook them. Put them in a blender. Blend them up with the fresh parsley.
Yeah.
And what this Dr. Beeler discovered in the early 1900s, he was an allopathic doctor, and
Right.
he had people like Greta Garbo back in the day as one of his clients.
Oh.
So, yeah. So, and his book is still published. It's still available. But so then, what those four vegetables do combined that way is give you a complete protein. It's 21 amino acids, and that's why I say you can supplement a meal with that. And what I would suggest to kind of shrink your stomach and make yourself how do you say, have the appetite for what exists at this moment. If you lower the capacity in your tummy, then your body doesn't crave as much.
Oh yes, I see what you're saying. Yes.
And also, if you introduce something that's alkaline, like this green soup, your body doesn't crave sugar.
Oh, that's the biggest thing. Is the sugar.
Yeah. Yep.
But
Me too.
let me just say, Sugar. Okay, so sugar is what creates insulin imbalances.
Yeah.
Okay, but honey does not,
Oh, okay.
especially raw local honey.
Yes.
So that's your go-to, and also it helps with allergies, and it's just a wonderful healthy food. That's your sweetener, and you can use that in place of any kind of maple syrup or anything, but try to stick with raw and local. And
Yes.
and you can use it in your baking. You can use it in every way you use sugar. But at this point, try to stay as fresh as you can and drink that soup. Drink like at least a cup or a cup and a half of it in the evening, so that your belly, so that you don't go to sleep on a full feeling stomach with carbohydrates and protein, heavy protein.
Yes.
And I think that little by little, your body chemistry is going to feel different. If you give yourself enough time, like 4 to 6 weeks with the consistency of no sugar, and then anything that might produce sugar, like a processed carbohydrate coming from bread or potatoes or wheat, any wheat product that's made there again, unfortunately this country has just used, and the world has used Roundup in their, the glyphosate chemical in their agriculture. So if you can stay as organic as you can, then and as fresh as you possibly. Now, don't get too fresh, but
that's something entirely different.
But and you'll feel it in your teeth. You'll feel it in your gums. You'll just see that you're going to start resonating at a different vibration.
Yes, I absolutely need to do that, because one of my life goals, and I don't know how it's going to come about. I just know that it is to find myself in Japan. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I could barely walk from my apartment to the mailbox, which is really a very short distance.
Yeah.
Without, feeling miserable once I get back into my flat. But when you're in Japan, you have to walk nearly everywhere. Walk to get to the train station or to get to the bus. You're going to have to walk.
Yeah.
And when you go to these tourist sites, you got to walk. And I just am so determined so that I, can walk and not feel miserable after just a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you're going to be cleaning your blood out. You're going to be cleaning your system out. Try that. He calls it his Beeler's Healer, and it's still being used in various formats, for different ailments. So try it. And the other thing that I like to do, because string beans and celery have strings, and so I just go that extra step and put it through a sieve, and after I puree everything, just to get some of that stringy stuff out. And when you drink it, it'll be more like velvet. And if you do that once a day and drink plenty of water.
I know it's hot everywhere. Black sun, and it is so hot. It's like,
wow.
It's
Yeah.
crazy hot.
Like we were saying, it is all over the planet, and extremes everywhere. Here, where I am in Australia, it is incredibly cold. I don't remember a colder winter than this one.
So it's all about extremes.
Wow.
It is.
I just feel on an energetic level that Mother Nature is like, hey man, who do you think you are? I'm gonna tell you, because this has been going on my whole life. So, you're 59, Adam is 40, and I've lived a very long life, and no one has really done enough about it. Although, on a lighter note, may I share with you? It's very funny.
Yes.
Yes. Well, I just stumbled onto a kind of a short series on the new HBO, which they're calling Max,
Yeah.
and it's Robert Downey Jr., who has decided to take on an environmental cause by converting his car collection into more alternative engines,
Yeah.
and so he had this 1965 Corvette,
Ooh, wow.
and it was in very like mint condition. So he talked to his crew that does the engine conversions, and he says, I only get about 5 miles to the gallon or something like that. He says, and I love to take this for a cruise. So what would it take to put an electric engine? And so they said, we'll do it. It kind of breaks our heart because this is such a classic, but we'll do it. And so they took the engine out and they replaced it. But then they said, what about your cracked up leather interior? And I mean, it was still in good enough shape, but they said, there is an organization now that's growing mycelium. They're taking mushrooms and they're turning it into leather.
Wow.
And so they reupholstered his 1965 Corvette with mushroom leather, and it looked fantastic.
That's amazing.
Odd. Yeah, the things they can do that. I know they're talking about growing meat, which isn't meat, in the lab, and so you're not, you're no longer eating meat. That's tremendous. So he just needs to add a little bit of butter, a little bit of salt, and put it in the sun for a while, and it's going to be delicious.
And Dr. Adam, in your country, there's a couple who have started a company with the potato peels that are used in like potato chip factories, and they're turning it into an alternative saran wrap.
Oh wow, that's amazing.
And I saw the saran wrap, and the darn stuff is exactly like the plastic stuff, but it's made from potato peels.
Isn't that fantastic that there's so much ingenuity, that we're facing so much challenges in the world, and all the difficulties we're having because of what we have caused, but there's so many people out there who are thinking differently and thinking of ways that we can reduce waste and do wonderful things like that. That's tremendous. I didn't know about them.
Yeah. So every time I hear of something innovative like that, I just get so happy, that of course, I'd love for there to be no more saran wrap and only potato peels made into that stuff. But, sooner or later, I think we may live to see the day that we'll be reading on the label made from potato peels.
Yes, it'll become the norm.
I think it will. And I think it's accelerated. I think, we've spent the 20th century and part of this young century, and maybe even going back into the 19th century, when oil and the automobile and I mean, I'm living in a place where there's copper mining, and that was done for electricity conduction and things like that. So for at least 150 to 200 years during the Industrial Revolution, there's been an attitude of exploitation and no respect or reverence for, for our resources. But that is going to change as well during the birthing of this Aquarian age. I mean, I just feel like it's inevitable. It just doesn't feel very pretty now at all.
That's very
true. I'm going to tell my son about the mushrooms. He's my oldest son.
Yeah.
He's an urban farmer up in Tallahassee.
Wow.
Yes. They grow primarily loofah.
Oh,
They grow loofah, yes, but I think he also grows mushrooms. So I'm going to ask him about that
Oh
if
wow,
he's aware of that.
absolutely. And is your family sort of dispersed all over the country, Kelly, or are some of your family close to you?
No, I'm here in New Mexico by
Yeah.
myself.
Uh-huh.
Two of the boys, the first two are in Florida. One is in Tallahassee, and the other one's in opposite end in Miami. And the baby, I'm going to just say that the baby is on a long walkabout. We're not really sure where he is, but he checks in from time to time, and I
Sure.
know he's okay.
Sure.
And as a mom, that's really all that I can ask for is to know
absolutely.
that he's all right. But yeah, he's on a long walkabout. I think
Sure.
that's exactly how he puts it. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And you said that you lived in Arizona for a while. Donna's obviously got a very long history in Arizona, both
Yes,
now
I
and
was
in the
actually
past.
born in Mesa,
Oh,
but I was raised in South Florida.
Yeah.
I had an occasion to go back to Arizona in 2012.
Mm.
Was there for a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, and I know we've been asking you a lot of questions or having a conversation, but we know what a big fan you are of Donna's work. So we're going to give you the floor to ask her any questions that you would like about what she's done or anything that you've always wanted to know.
Donna, I really just want to know. I mean, you told me part of your secret so far, but I really just want to know what is your fountain of youth, because apparently you found it and you're just so young. You know what I'm saying? You're very young, and what is your secret besides the soup?
Good
besides,
question.
I know, but it's my favorite four-letter word. It's it's all based on love and
Yes.
just this knowing that there's a beautiful spirit out there that is available whenever I reach out, and so I don't know, I feel blessed that when I came in, that whatever adversities I had to meet with, I always knew that I could connect vertically, and that I, even if I felt lonely, I wasn't alone. I was never alone, and that has just that's just in my savior, and also I don't know, I try my hardest to be in forgiveness, but starting, this was the hardest thing, is to forgive yourself.
Yeah.
I used to think that I needed to be forgiven, and for whatever anybody didn't like about me, or whatever their feelings were, or whatever their prejudices were, and for whatever I may have done, I don't, consciously or unconsciously. But then I finally realized, wait a minute, I have to start with number one. I've got to start with myself, and that's the hardest part, is to forgive yourself, and kind of release some of that tension and stress inside of you, so that your blood can flow, and then you keep connecting, like you said, with like-minded, and create a community that you support one another. And you just, that love just keeps generating, and and then you just have that confidence. Sometimes I just I just look out in my garden, and I have to say, okay, now Kelly is one of the flowers in my garden.
How lovely. And yeah,
Thank
mean, I'm not going to say I know the secret of aging. I don't, but I did speak recently. I did speak very recently, only last week, the end of last week, to a 103-year-old,
Oh,
a psychologist whose work I
Wow.
had read. Yeah, I decided, because I'm I often talk about, I'm very about, being grateful to people who have shaped, influenced my
Yes.
thinking, and so I thought I'm going to find a way to get in contact with him, and I was able to do so. And we had a
Wow.
lovely conversation, and yeah, he was talking kind of about, in terms of, I guess, what was important for him was staying connected to people.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
that was kind of, he said, there's not necessarily a lot of secrets, but for him it was about, he's always felt he wants to connect with people. And I think also, staying interested in whatever it is you're interested in. It can be reading about the world, it can be about gardening, it can be about connecting with people, it could be about studying spirituality, whatever, but feeling that you have something that you're interested in is really important as well.
Just to know who you
Yes.
are more and more, and let those layers and layers that we've all come in with, it's like an artichoke, You just keep peeling it back, peeling it back, peeling it back, and then finally you get to the heart. And that's the most tender part. But so many of us have had to, as you say, in a marriage that it was difficult, maybe dangerous, that you had to protect yourself, and then to go out in the world and trust again.
Yes.
That's yeah. And but it seems like you're well on your way.
Yeah, I believe so. During those difficult times, I was just in survival mode. I was
Yes.
just trying to get from 1 minute to the next
Yeah.
alive. And being in the shelter, actually, although that was a trippy place to be, but being in that shelter gave me time, I would say, to just get back together in my head. If that makes any sense.
Sure.
Yes. And I'm thankful that I had that experience in that particular shelter. For just a lot of reasons. That's like a whole other 2-hour episode. But
Wow.
I'm very thankful for the time that was spent there, even though it was not pleasant. It wasn't because of the shelter or the people in the shelter, the residents. It was primarily because of the people in charge of the shelter.
Sure.
They their motives were not always for our benefit, so it just made being there kind of rough. But I would not have given up that experience.
Wow.
I just learned a lot about myself.
Yeah.
So what do you do
because
with
of
your
it.
spare time? I mean, do you have a diary or a journal, or how do you keep your
What
memory?
I've been studying Japanese
Fantastic.
online.
Yeah.
Yes. Just really focusing more on the conversation. Because when I get there, I need to be able to communicate verbally.
Absolutely. Yeah.
On
Well, Adam,
occasion, I'll do reading, but primarily it's conversation and just trying to understand what people are saying. I tend not to look at the captions. I just because when you do that and you're solely relying on what you hear, you begin to pick up words and patterns, speech patterns, and that's how you get it. And so
yeah,
that's what I've been doing.
that's fantastic. I have a book
Anything.
I can suggest to you.
Oh yes, I want to know.
Well, there was a book, I've forgotten now exactly when, but I would say maybe 20 years ago. It's called Memoirs of a Geisha.
Oh yeah, they made the movie out of it.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, it's a story written from the author is a Jewish man who had the experience in Japan of witnessing several geishas. And and their lives, and he made a composite into one from the ones that he experienced, and wrote an incredible book that it's very, very dramatic
Yeah.
to learn about the life of a geisha. But the ultimate lesson in this book was the strength of your own convictions.
Yeah.
And, and that's what I loved so much about it. And I tell you, when I read it, I was going to a hair salon on the Big Island in Hawaii, and I
Mm-hmm.
showed up with my book, and every woman in the salon had one.
Oh.
We're all sitting under hair dryers reading our memoirs of a geisha. Yeah, it's very compelling.
Donna and Adam, am I allowed to ask you one more question?
Yeah, sure.
Certainly.
Okay, I want to know, because you've been entertaining for such a long time, when is it that you became spiritually aware? Were you spiritually aware when you were 12 and on the Mickey Mouse Club, or was it when you were the Dr. Pepper girl, or was it much later in life?
Yeah, good question.
So, actually, just to be precise, I was 10 years old. On my 10th birthday is when I was on the Mickey Mouse Club.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, on my 10th birthday. Actually, I remember when I was at least 3 years old that no one told me to pray before I went to sleep. But after, I was told, all right, bedtime, and I got in my little bed, and the door was ajar, and I was on my own, and I would crawl out of bed and get on my knees and thank my grandparents and anyone that came into my to my little head, and I think it was just an instinct that I felt that when I was a very small child, and it's I think that's just something that you come in with, and I don't know, I've just put it into practice. And actually, I had a very interesting experience. This is kind of it has its shades of glory, and it has its shades of shadow. But my husband's mother was basically on her way out, and she was a very elderly woman, and she had told me that when she was a little girl, that she always said her prayers before she went to sleep. So here she is lying in a hospice, in kind of comatose, and she was not aware of. And this priest walked by in the hallway and popped his head in and said, "Is there something I can do?" And I said, "Well, I recognize, my mother-in-law is not of your faith." And he opens his Bible and he finds a prayer in her religion, different religion. And so we invited him in the room, and he came and he sat down next to her. And my husband and I were sitting at the foot of the bed, and the priest said the prayer, and my mother-in-law passed. She needed that prayer to be released. Otherwise, physically, she was just hanging on.
Right. You hear that a lot sometimes, yeah, that they almost need that permission to go.
And I think it was her faith and her spiritual practice, that she just needed to feel complete.
Right.
So, I don't know how many times a day I say thank God, but I can't even count, because I'm always it's just ever present, omnipresent, because that's my favorite place to be.
Yeah.
So I think that's the clearest answer that I can give you is, just whatever family influence or society influence that you've had, there's always been a faith and trust, and now you've kind of said, okay, I don't need the dogma, you know.
Right.
I'm there.
Yes, exactly.
Well, nobody's perfect, honey. You know that for sure.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, I do know.
Yeah. So, you know, I just feel really fortunate and blessed that in this time of my life I can look back and know, you know, who loved me, who didn't, and then I just have to do the work to overcome whatever obstacles are there, and it's constant, you know. It's it's like I'm never
Yeah.
bored, that's for sure. You know, life is not boring.
Yep,
No, it's not.
absolutely.
There's always something.
Yeah, and we thank you, Kelly, because I think just to share your story with us and have this conversation, I think anyone listening, you know, it'll help other people as well, who we're all going through, you know, different things, but we can connect and we can see the commonality in experience and what people have learned, and I think that's really, really valuable. So thank you.
Yes, Kelly.
Oh, thank you.
Yes,
I really don't give up on your dreams.
Mm.
You know, whatever it is that you want, just keep thinking source for it, because it will come to fruition, one way or the other.
thank you for that, sweetheart.
Right.
Thank you. We honor this time with you, sweetheart.
Thank you. Thank you. Likewise.
And you just continue on your path of getting well and contributing to the world in the way that we all wish it to be. And sayonara, and
Bless you all. Thank you so much.
thank you.
Right. Thanks again.
Domo arigato. Thank you, Kelly, for being on Love's a Secret Weapon podcast.
I can touch the stars. I can reach the moon. I can soar up in a cloudless sky. Ah, something's in the air. Something's coming soon.
Yes,